So, let's rank Eminem albums. Yes, I want to do that. I've been listening to the Eminem show extended version. Went on this whole rampage of listening to Eminem albums, and I reflected. I was like, man, it'd be dope. Let's rank these albums. So let's get into that. I'm gonna explain for some of these albums why they're ranked where they're ranked. Some of them I'm not. I'm just gonna say the names. So let's start with the worst one. Had to get a sip of that sparkling water. Let's start with the worst one. I think, for the most part, universally, most people can agree this is the worst Eminem album. Now, before I start, disclaimer, I'm not including the Infinite project, which was like before he really got signed. I'm not including the mixtape, the re-up. I'm not including collab projects with Bad Meets Evil or what are the other albums? I keep forgetting. D12 or anything like that. I'm not including anything like that. This is just Eminem major releases, solo albums. Nothing else out of that. So don't mention to me, why didn't you include this? Let's start out with the worst one. So he has 10 albums out when he signed. Technically it's 11, but whatever. 10 albums officially. Let's start with the worst one. To me, the worst Eminem album, I've said this thousands of times, is Revival. And I'm going to explain why it's the worst one, because it's the last one on the list. Let me explain at least why. I've always said this. The concept of the album is great. What Eminem was trying to portray as a message was great. To me, the execution was bad. And that's it. That happens with artists. There's nothing wrong with that. It happens with every artist. It does not make Eminem a garbage artist. The backlash he was getting when the album came out was not warranted, in my opinion. I think he tried his best. It just didn't pan out the way he would have hoped. There are a couple of records that I like on the album, but that's really about it. It's probably 2 to 3 tracks, if that. Everything else was kind of whitewashed, and it was just, it was not that good. So that's the worst Eminem album, in my opinion, Revival. I think universally, for the most part, most people agree with that. If you ask the average person that's an Eminem fan, they would say Revival is the worst album. The ninth album. The ninth album to me is the Marshall Mathers LP2. Here's why. The album title. Had he never named it the Marshall Mathers LP2, I think I would have viewed it from a different perspective. I don't like the fact that it's a sequel to, arguably to a lot of Eminem fans, his greatest album ever, the first Marshall Mathers LP. I think that puts it at like an expectation that's very, very high. And I never want artists to lead up their classic albums with a part 2. That just never works out. God forbid, if 50 ever did Get Rich or Die Trying 2, it would taint the original Get Rich or Die Trying for me. So the tracks weren't that good. There are a few that were great. Headlights is probably one of the more memorable ones, where he talks about his mom and fixing the relationship with her. A lot of it I just didn't like on the album. It's not his worst album. The Revival is definitely the worst one. Marshmallow's LP2, I think the title, the expectations I had for it, really upset me, really put me down. So that's why, to me, it's the 9th album in terms of his best. The 8th, Music to Be Murdered By. It's a great album. Is it, for me, forgettable? Yeah. It's not an album that I really listen to like that. There's a few tracks here and there, but it's definitely better than Marshmallow's LP2 and Revival. It is what it is. It's an album that's good. Slim Shady LP is the number 7. I enjoyed it, but it's never been an album to me that I really, really listened to like that. It's a great, great album. Just to me, it doesn't do it like that. It's a great album, though. It's a great introduction to the world from Eminem. Successful album. It did 180,000 first week, but then went on to do I think it went diamond. I don't know what the numbers are on it, but it did well. Number 6, Recovery. I really enjoy Recover because, I kind of disliked it and enjoyed it for this reason. I liked it because Eminem recognized the backlash he was getting from Relapse, kind of switched it up and tried something differently. And in the album, he's admitting when he was, what's that song, Talking to Myself, where he talks about, he got jealous of Kanye, Lil Wayne for being at the top, and You know, he was like, man, I could never compete with these people. It was just a great album, top to bottom. A lot of memorable tracks on there. I really like Cold Wind Blows, Spacebound. A lot of records that are great on there. Not Afraid. Even the Rihanna record I really enjoyed. Overall, great album. Great kind of comeback run. You know, yeah, great album. Number 5, Encore. A lot of people, this is where a lot of people say Eminem started to fall off, or just people stopped liking Eminem. A lot of people give Encore a lot of backlash. I disagree with it. There's a lot of tracks on the album that I enjoy, but I can see where people kind of, you know, have their issues with the album. You know, Like Toy Soldiers, great record. You got even the Encore title track with 50 Dre, and you got a lot of records on them that are amazing. Yeah, that's my number 5. Number 4, Kamikaze. This, to me, the way Eminem, this is the beauty. This is all because of Revival. Because of that backlash he got from Revival, it birthed a very fucking great Eminem album. An Eminem album that I still listen to this day, that's modern, that sounds dope as fuck. That album, that's an album, and the next, so this is the 4th one. The next 3 that I'm going to mention are albums you can only create once because of the moment. What do I mean by that? With Kamikaze, you can't create that moment back again. If you release the Kamikaze 2, it would not be as great as the first one, because we were not expecting that from Eminem. We were not expecting a whole response album from Eminem from the backlash of Revival. We were not respecting that. We were not expecting that at all. So that whole energy, when that album came out, all eyes were on Eminem again. Sold great as an album. Has amazing replay value and it's a short album, which is even more amazing to me. I like shorter albums. It's like 11, 12 tracks, something like that. And I can still listen to it to this day. And I love the response. That aura, that energy, you'll never get back. And with all these next albums I'm going to mention, you're never going to get that energy back. So that's why I really enjoy these type of albums. It's albums that are you can only do it once, one take, and whether you hit or miss, it's done. It's like Revival. He was taking in all this stuff that was going on politically, all the stuff around the world, the mass shootings, all this stuff, but he just missed on the execution. With Kamikaze, he nailed it, which is beautiful. That's when the albums come out to be amazing. Kamikaze, to me, number 4, one of the best Eminem albums, and especially if you want to split Eminem's career, right? You want to be like, okay, there's drug Eminem, which was from Encore, whatever, from Slim Shady LP all the way up to Encore. You can even add in Re-Up, but we're not mentioning that. So from Slim Shady to Encore, that's the drug Eminem. And then you can split it to the recovery, whatever, the clean, sober Eminem. Kamikaze is one of his best albums as a sober artist, as someone, on a whole different path in his life. So I really appreciate the album. I still listen to this day. A lot of tracks on there. The Ringers, that's the intro, I think, on it. It's one of my favorite tracks. The Not Alike record, the Lucky You with Joyner Lucas, that album I just enjoyed. I loved it. And like I said, that aura, that energy of him going back at everyone and everyone being surprised, just perfect execution. And it was a surprise album, just randomly dropped. So shout out to Eminem for that one. Number 3, and this is going to be a controversial thing for a lot of people because they're going to be like, why is this here? Why? Usually this is the album that everyone considers Eminem's best. I put the Marshall Mathers LP at number 3. So why did I put it at number 3? I enjoyed the album. I love the album. I love the fact that it's again, one of those albums you can't capture that energy ever again. Eminem went from being a brand new artist on the Slim Shady LP, selling 180-something thousand, whatever the first week was, and then eventually doing good on the album. But, you do 180-something thousand, then you start to blow up later down the line. All of a sudden, you got this new level of fame. And then you drop the Marshall Mathers LP, and you reflect for the most part. You're kind of getting used to it. you just now got a taste of success and you're trying to balance it and figure it out. And that's what the Marshall Mathers LP is. You know, that's just the way I am, where he talks about, you know, I don't want to, you know, you're coming up to me and asking for a picture where I'm just trying to chill with my daughter and, you know, eat, and all these other records that he has on the album, the storytelling, all that. It's very personal. That's why he called it Marshall Mathers LP. Great album, great production. But there was a few things missing. There's a few things that you could tell Eminem hadn't had quite perfected on that album. Lots of small things like deliveries, album orientation, the way you plan out these tracks, certain things like that. I just felt like Eminem could have done better. But it's top 3 for me of Eminem's catalog. It's a fucking amazing album. I can see why people consider it one of the best. It has Stan on there, which is obviously one of the best storytelling records of all time. You know, and it classics. That album has classics, and you know, it sold an insane amount. I think right now it's at 21 million copies worldwide. The first week it did like 1.76 million first week, and at that moment, Eminem outsold literally everybody. Like the only people that were outselling him were pop groups. NSYNC did like 2 million copies, I think, first week. Groups of artists were the only ones that could outsell Eminem. So, you know, this album, you know, you can't recapture that. You can't re-experience finally experiencing fame, you know, for the first time. You're never gonna get that experience again, because that's a first time thing. It's a one-time thing that you can experience, and then you get used to it after that, and then you get to kind of go on your journey. Number 2, Relapse. I was listening to Relapse, you know, with the Eminem show. I was listening to Relapse. A lot of people, I remember this album dropped, even me at the time. A lot of people didn't like the accent. They couldn't get over the accent. But what they missed is the fucking oh my God, the story, the whole, from top to bottom, even the intro skit where like the doctor's there is talking to him, and he's talking to the guy, and he's like, hey, you know, don't have to go follow these steps, this 12-step program of, you know, recovering and, you know, getting out of addiction. And then the doctor turns to the devil and is like, hey, you know, you want these meds? You still want to take? It's just the way he painted this picture of the drug addiction that he had was so beautifully done, but it was outshadowed by the accent. The fucking wordplay, the rhymes in it was just insane. Like, you guys got to go listen to the album. The way it was executed was, to me, perfect. And here's the shame part of this album. The part that I was really pissed off about is my 2 favorite tracks off the album is My Darling and Careful What You Wish For. Careful What You Wish For me, is one of the best Eminem tracks of all time. Just the intro where you have the turn, like the switching of TV channels, where it talks about all the things Eminem went through. Obi Trice getting shot in the head, Proof dying, is Eminem retiring, all this in the beginning. And then you listen to the track, Careful What You Wish For. It's so beautifully done. And that's, to me, that's the best Eminem voice on a track. To me, the way he sounds on that record is what I like Eminem to sound like. I don't like certain sounds that Eminem does, especially recently now. He sounds a lot more, these bars are like COVID. You can only get it, whatever. You know, what's that record, Godzilla, where he says, what's that fucking bar? It's hilarious. On Godzilla, on the murdered music to be murdered by. Anyways, I forget the line, but the voice is funny, you know. On Careful What You Wish For, he nails the way he sounds. It's not yelling. It's executed perfectly, and it's potent, and it's very direct, and you can tell he's going through some shit when he wrote that record. And throughout the whole album, he's like that, but despite the accent, a lot of people can't get over the accent, and I don't understand why. Even Relapse Refill had amazing tracks on it. Music Box is one of my favorites out of the Refill. What's the other records on there? Even Taking My Ball. It's a funny accent, you know, but it's a great record. I really enjoyed this album, and that's another album that you can't recapture. That Eminem can't recapture that, from going from a drug addict to being sober and recording music, being sober, and finally coming back to the limelight after losing his best friend, Proof. Having to deal with that and finally coming back from that and trying to deliver an album where he questioned his own ability to even be able to deliver music. You can't recreate that. He executed it perfectly. I remember him announcing Relapse 2. We never got it. I'm very disappointed. And yeah, it's I think to me it's the last real shady Eminem album, because if you look at the production, mainly handled by Dr. Dre and Eminem, had features from 50. It was mainly in-house shady. Had a feature from 50, not features, but yeah, it was mainly in-house, Dr. Dre, Eminem, and that was the last time we really got an album like that. All these other albums have been produced by major other producers, which I enjoy. I like the fact that Eminem went out there and tried other producers. It worked out for him, especially on Kamikaze. I really enjoyed it, like I said. But that was the last like in-house shady album that we got, which I wish Eminem would go back to. I want an in-house shady production with Eminem, Dr. Dre, and just feature old, 50. Hell, if you want Kendrick, more like shady back then or whatever you want, kind of mix it up. But I really enjoy Relapse. I think it's very underrated. The bonus tracks, especially My Darling, oh my God, the conversation between him and the devil that he voices on there is just perfect, man. It's perfectly executed. The beat is so dark and menacing. It's just beautiful. The album is, I think, it's, to me, the second best Eminem album of all time. And you guys already know what's going to be number one, the Eminem Show. Here is why. This is another moment that, and this is a moment that only few artists in the world ever experience. And people forget about this. People do not notice this on this album. Whenever I talk to them about this album, people do not pick up on this. How many artists reached the peak that Eminem, the heights that Eminem has reached? And I'm not saying, because Eminem, what he's done in first week sales, no hip hop artist has done. I'm not saying in sales, but I'm just saying being the dominant number one artist. When Eminem released the Eminem Show, even though it sold a little bit less first week than Marshall Mathers LP because of the leaks and stuff, because if it wouldn't have leaked, I think it would either matched Marshall Mathers LP or did a little bit below it. Overall, the album's like 27 million copies sold more. I mean, not sold more, but worldwide has sold 27 million copies. Marshall Mathers LP is at 21, 22. So clearly it's the most successful Eminem album. Production is handled by Eminem, which was fucking fantastic. Execution was perfect. Every track on there was just perfectly placed. You can tell Eminem was more refined, more direct, more knew that he tweaked little things from Marshall Mathers LP and made it just perfect. The way it was executed was perfect. Here is something about this album that people never mention, that goes over their heads. Eminem and only a few artists, you can name 50, you can name Kanye, you can name Drake, you can name Lil Wayne, you can name, I don't know. What I mean by this, why I'm naming these artists, is those artists at one point were number one dominant. They had the number one slot, and you knew it. There's nothing you could say about it. Number one, period. Those artists that I mentioned. There's probably a few more that I'm forgetting. You had Lil Wayne, Kanye, Drake, 50, M. You had a few others, but number one. Now, to reach that level of dominating as number one, nobody, like I said, only those five that I can mention, probably a few more, but only those five that I'm thinking of right now had that number one dominant spot and know what it feels like to be number one with a bullet. I'm talking, the gap is like here. It's like basketball where you got LeBron James, who dominated the league for 10 years and this is where LeBron is and everybody else was here. That's basically Eminem at that time. Eminem was here and everybody else was here. What Eminem did, the whole world was looking at. So Eminem had to, with that album, what he did, he was explaining that point of view, that level. It's like an eagle. An eagle can go see the whole landscape of things. That's where Eminem was at. Eminem was the eagle. And other artists were caterpillars or people that were on, animals that were on the ground. Or animals that could climb trees and see a little bit higher. But they didn't get to that eagle point of view where that eagle is at. That eagle can see everything. And that's where Eminem was at. Eminem was at the eagle point of view. Because a caterpillar can't relate to what an eagle envisions. Eminem was seeing things, was dealing with things that no artist at that peak understood because nobody reached that level. There's only a few that ever did. That's what made this album so beautiful, is he was speaking from that point of view, from all the backlash, from him being a white rapper, speaking on gang, guns, all this, talking about his mom, all this. Sing for the Moment, for example. Kids looking up to him talking in that record about, hey, I shouldn't be looked at as a fucking, as a role model for these kids. Why are you guys blaming me for these kids grabbing guns and doing these things? He's like, I grab guns to protect myself. They don't understand that. They're looking up to me like I'm supposed to, dictate what happens with these kids that are looking up to me. Then you got songs where he's battling with fame. Say Goodbye to Hollywood. He said, this real life, this fame is sick. He's saying, I can't deal with this shit, And he was talking about how he wants to leave this. He's tired of this. This level of fame is insane. It's something that only a few artists, Michael Jackson, let's get out of hip hop. Let's just talk artists in general. Michael Jackson experienced that type of level of fame. There's only a few. Madonna, rare, select few artists that ever experienced dominating with a bullet at number one. And Eminem gave us that point of view perfectly. Executed it so fucking perfectly. White America, that record alone, the execution on that album is just the titling of the Eminem show where, hey, I'm Eminem, you guys are watching this whole show breakdown of what's going on, and I'm getting picked at. When you're at that level of fame, you're getting picked at by everything. I mean, people were attacking Eminem for everything. There were protests, all kinds of shit going on. So that's why the Eminem show not only is his best-selling album, but to me is the best album from Eminem, period. Because he'll never reach that peak ever again. Who knows if any hip-hop artist will ever reach that peak ever again. To sell that many records, to dominate like that in that year of 2002. And then on top of that, he was dealing with his own question of, I just delivered the Eminem show. What the fuck am I going to do after this? This is the greatest performing album of my career. He was like, I was questioning where hip-hop's headed because I know eventually my peak is gonna dwindle. And that's when he found 50 Cent. And then 50 Cent had his peak and dominated for the next 2 to 3, 4 years. So, yeah, I think just the execution of everything on that, to get it from that point of view where only a few select people ever experience, and for him to explain to us what that was like on that album, is I wish more artists would have done. I wish more artists would have done that. I really think about it, not many artists do that. Whether it's because they don't want to get personal, but Eminem did that. He gave that to us. And, just so well executed, man, from production to everything. So that to me is why the Eminem show is the best Eminem album. Nobody ever mentions that point of view from that album. I think that point of view, no artist, it's select few artists that ever reached that, man. It's a godly status. Like I said, Eminem was here. The gap was so fucking big. I don't think people remember. I was a kid and I remember a gap. Kids nowadays do not know how big Eminem was. They have no clue. The guy was, everything that guy did was talked about. The guy could take a shit in a public stall and a news reporter would have gone in there and sniffed the fucking shit and been like, this is the fucking, Eminem shit smells like corn and whatever the fuck it is. He's got corn in his shit, whatever. That's how under a microscope he was, man. They would smell his shit and write about it. He spit his fucking gum on the ground. They'd pick it up and analyze it. What? Anything that guy did that's Michael Jackson status, which people never reach. I'm not comparing it. Michael Jackson was a whole fucking, we're talking Michael Jackson, a whole different tier, but Michael Jackson's like Michael Jackson, then you got Eminem, and then you got, but I'm just saying in hip-hop, that was the Michael Jackson of hip-hop at that point because nobody reached that level. Nobody reached that tier. Nobody reached that amount of criticism. Nobody reached any of that, man. He dealt with so much shit and he fought back. He was the one that was catching them, arrows at his back, and he was fighting back at it. And that experience he'll never be able to capture that again. It's a once-in-a-lifetime type of thing. With a lot of these artists, you can't recapture these moments. That's why I rank the Marshall Mathers LP so low, because you can't recapture that moment. Don't ever try to follow up a moment like that. It just never works out. It never sounds the same. It never works like it's supposed to. So that's my Eminem album ranking. Number 10, Revival. Number 9, Marshall Mathers LP. Number 8, Music to be Murdered By. Number 7, the Slim Shady LP. Number 6, Recovery. Number 5, Encore. Number 4, Kamikaze. Number 3, the Marshall Mathers LP. Number 2, Relapse. And number 1, the Eminem Show.